All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting everything ready to go. Make sure I don't. Why does this go to private? Public? All right, everybody, we're starting Super Chat Sunday. It is July 9th. Thank you for joining. Let me know if you're having any technical difficulties. I just put this on Twitter, and hopefully a bunch of you will join in. So we've got the live stream. Heldt says good. I have it on public. We have it on monetization is good. Stream options are good. Cards are going to be put in there. Basic info. There we go, everybody. I hope you can see me and hear me. So, welcome to Super Chat Sunday. My name is Graham Elwood. This is the Political Vigilante show. And as soon as we get some people on here, we'll start answering your questions. And I'm going to just... let me do... All right. Oh! God's favorite liberal. All right. Hey, you made it here, finally. I know you've been busy. Missed the last couple, so I'm going to try to do this on Sundays either at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. Pacific time, which is 5 or 6 o'clock East Coast time. And hope the sound is good. Everybody can hear everything. Every other Sunday I have a commitment, so I need to do it a little earlier. But this time seems to be working for everybody. All right, it works. Right on. So, just so you know, we just released the episode 4 of the Political Vigilante podcast. I'm glad you like. I'm glad you like the blue, right, L Rose. And so that's available at the $5 and up level. A couple of you have done the $25 and up level, so I sent out an email. Please check your spam folders because sometimes the Patreon emails get lost. But if you are a $25 and up level, there's only a couple of you. We get to set up a live Skype interview once a month, so email me times of the week that are good for you, and we can figure out a time. All right, let's get right to the questions. Jake, why do you think Bernie has not yet signed on with Draft Bernie? What do you think we can do to get the People's Party moving forward with a platform and with or without Bernie? You know, Bernie sticking with the DNC is very perplexing, I think. And some people alluded to, there was an interview with Ralph Nader and Chris Hedges, I believe, back in 2016 where Nader predicted this. I haven't seen that interview yet. I'd like to watch it. But I think what I can tell is Bernie didn't want to become like Ralph Nader. So after 2000, Ralph Nader, you know, a lot of Democrats, of course, blamed him, whatever else, just like they're blaming the Green Party, or, you know, they always blame somebody else other than themselves. But Ralph Nader used to, if you look at his history in the 60s and 70s, he was a Democratic activist. And whenever there was, you know, he had that unsafe at any speed, whenever there was something that somebody was, whatever, taking advantage, or a corporation was out of line or whatever, he would get together a committee, he would go to Congress and the Senate, and we'd get things changed, and we get legislation changed. So then after that started changing in the 80s and 90s when the corporations took over, when the DNC, I did that video where it was in 1979 where the head fundraiser for the DNC said, oh, we're going to start going after corporate money. So cut to 2000 when Al Gore loses the election, the Democrats blame Ralph Nader. He got shoved aside, so no corporate Democrats, nobody in the Democratic Party or infrastructure gives him any time at all. And Bernie is afraid of that happening. He doesn't want to become like Ralph Nader. So I don't know. My hope, I guess, is that he's going to just finally have enough after 2018. Because look, as we've seen, so there's been 4 seats that Democrats could have taken over, and they lost all four of them. John Ossoff being the last one. So I don't know. I hope Bernie realizes this and goes to draft Bernie. If he doesn't, if he still keeps banking on the Democratic Party doing something, then we got to just start a new party. I'd like to start the American Progressive Party. We got to get the word Democrat out of there. That word is awful. But I would love to start an American Progressive Party. And if Bernie wanted to join that, and Tulsi or Nina or whomever, and real progressives getting in there, I think that would be fantastic. Because if Bernie decides to just keep riding this sinking ship of the DNC, then we got to come up with somebody else. And maybe it's Nina Turner. I don't know. As I've said, it's not about a particular person necessarily. It's about, I want a real progressive. I want someone out there that's going to really do something, that's going to really say no more war, single payer, universal health care. We're getting it. I want, that's not going to like, well, we got to play both sides and, make these concessions and give in. And then, before know it, they're just another dumb corporate Democrat. So I don't know if it's going to be Bernie or not, quite honestly. Andrew Emanuel. Hey, going to be on Jimmy Dore anytime soon? Andrew, I don't know. I'm sure I will. Jimmy's always a very busy man, interviews a lot of different people, so you never know. When I don't have anything scheduled right now, but I'm asked often. Hopefully, we'll be on his live show again, and Aggressive Progressive and all that. But I don't have a specific date. God's favorite atheist. Why do you think Bernie didn't use the DNC cheating to his advantage? Didn't the emails prove they cheated? That is a great question, and I think it goes back to the same thing that I was just saying. If he really, really called out the Democratic Party and showed here's how evil they are, then they would just shun him, and he wouldn't get to be on these committees, and he's on all this stuff. Even though he's an independent, they still include him in a lot of stuff, and I think if he was afraid of not being included anymore. That's just my sort of guess or sense of it based on what he's done since then. Pamela Nordstrom, Bernie isn't with the DNC, he denounces them. Yeah, I know, Pamela, yes, he does denounce them publicly, but he's still on this unity tour. Like, he still hasn't he needs to come, if he's going to do it, he needs to just come out and say the Democratic Party is lost, there's no hope for them. I'm doing draft Bernie, I'm doing whatever. I'm starting my own independent party, and I've got Nina Turner, Tulsi Gabbard, and whoever else she can get. Kim Ellis, whoever, and we're going forward. So guys, just so you know, a great way to support the show. You see the dollar sign. If you hit the super chat sign, you can give a little money, and then your question goes, and it's highlighted for me to see, and I will absolutely answer it and discuss it. Jake. Dem Party not learning 2008 is going to be a disaster if we don't get something moving fast. Yeah, I think you're right. The fact that they've gone 0 for 4 shows me that that's probably correct. They keep, that I did that video on the Clinton strategist, Mike Penn, who, we got to stop hanging out on the left with those crazy progressives. The Democratic Party needs to come to the center. They're not going to get it. The money is going to tell them where to go. And in 2018... one of two things is going to happen, probably both, depending on the seat. They're either going to get crushed even more, Republicans are going to pick up even more seats in 2018, or they'll get a couple of victories with corporate Democrats and go, yay, resist Trump. That's the best that'll happen in 2018. But I think more people will realize you just can't bank on this party. I think 28, my fear is that if too many dumb corporate Democrats win in 18, then people that haven't woken up yet on the left, the neoliberals, they'll just think, yay, resist, and we just got to get anybody else in there. I don't know. But 2018 isn't going to be some big blue takeover. I don't see that happening the way this DNC party's acting. Alexander Ostojevic. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly this time. Yes, that was a great question. Pamela Nordstrom, he is doing pretty well without messing with new parties. He can call a rally and thousands will show up. Well, Pamela, that's the issue here with Bernie. Because Bernie can call a rally and thousands will show up, why doesn't he just say, let's start a new party? as I've talked about, as Jimmy Dore and others have talked about, the Republican Party was this new crazy party. The Whig Party, that was the strong party, and there was this crazy guy, Abraham Lincoln, with this new Republican Party, and the Whigs are gone. So that's why it's like, why is Bernie even, he just needs to start a third party, and a bunch of people would jump on board, I think. Because the Democrats are going to lose a bunch of bullshit in 2018, and you wait and see who their candidate for 2020 is. It'll be another, maybe it'll be Elizabeth Warren, but she's like the friendliest of the corporate Democrats, at best. Jake, Bernie as a person, the movement should be more about policy. Absolutely. And that's the thing. If Bernie wants to keep hanging on with the DNC, the reason why Bernie is significant is because he's the most popular person. And why I say it should be about policy, I agree with you. But Bernie has a giant following. He is the most popular politician in America. So he has the power. That's a lot of power he has to just say, I'm starting an independent party, and this is what we're going to be all about. Because if it isn't someone with his much clout, then it's just like, then it's just Jill Stein or somebody that just doesn't have the juice, like to do it. That's why it would be significant if he did that, in my opinion. So, all right, where are we at? A bunch of questions came in. Andrew Emanuel, yeah, but Bernie is the one who galvanized those people. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Kevin Martinez, I know I would. Can I get a fuck yes? All right, Kevin. Yeah, not a question, but yeah, we can get a fuck yes. Cannon Fodder, I agree. We need a third party. Yeah, it's becoming so obvious. We agree on all that. Christopher McMillan, I think parties are coming to an end. Yeah. I agree. I just don't know how we get around them yet, because the two parties control the primaries. They control the whole electoral system. And I think Americans want a party to say that they're part of or whatever. I just don't know if the rise of the growing number of independents who can be anything. Independents, it's a false assumption to assume that they're just on the left. There's a lot of right-leaning independents. I mean, look at how many votes Gary Johnson got. Maybe that was a cause of how many people were just disgusted with Trump. I don't know. But he got many, many more votes than Jill Stein. So I don't know. We might need a party for people to get around. I would love to see no parties. I just don't realistically see that happening. I don't. Maybe I'm wrong. But Pamela Nordstrom, yes, Bernie is a registered independent, but he just keeps being a part of the DNC. Collins Dario, why don't people use the argument that other countries such as England have single payer, and why don't try to get their health care? It's one of the best in the world and it's free. Well, yeah, that's because you look at the healthcare industry and big pharmaceuticals, they give equal amounts of money to the Republicans and Democrats. Whomever's in power, they dump so much money. So, and look who buys all the ad time on the corporate media in America. You cannot watch any piece of MSNBC, CNN, Fox, or ABC, NBC, CBS without ads for new prescriptions. You can't. Or this new doctor, or that. You can't do it. So they control so much. So they control the message. That's why whenever it is brought up, it's brought up as pie in the sky. It's unrealistic. It's crazy. How are we going to pay for all this? And no one wants to say it's doable. England's doing it. There's 20-some countries doing it. Let's cut the crap and figure this out. That's why. God's favorite atheist. Do you think things like superdelegates or the Electoral College keeps us from having a true democracy? Well, yeah, that's one of the reasons for sure. Superdelegates are just a flat-out scam. I mean, you know, if you look at what's going on in the DNC, the DNC lawsuit, all of it. That's why it's so preposterous for all these Democrats and the Hillary supporters blaming, angry Bernie supporters who bailed. And it's like they don't want to admit that they're cheating. They don't want to admit the whole thing is stacked. The Electoral College. We have yet again the The last two times Republicans have taken over from a Democratic president in 2000 and 2016 is by winning the electoral votes but not winning the popular vote. It's ridiculous. And now the argument is made that if we get rid of the electoral college, people in small and rural areas, they won't have a voice. Well, that's incorrect, because what people keep doing is they keep applying the state model to even if we get rid of electoral, but there's not, there's more people in California or New York, so they will determine it. No, what it'll mean is every vote counts. There is no more winning of states if we abandon the electoral college. So a vote in New York City and a vote in, rural Wyoming would count the same. Also, there's a bunch of states that Hillary and Trump didn't visit during this election because they felt they didn't need to. Now, Hillary obviously made a huge mistake in not going to Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio, I believe. But Trump didn't go to like Wyoming and a couple other of those like red states. And so currently under the Electoral College system, if you live in a rural area, a lot of your needs are not being addressed because you just have someone from whatever party your state always votes for just kind of assumes they got your vote. They don't have to campaign. They don't have to address any of your issues. So, yes, God's favorite atheist, I think those two reasons are why we don't have not exclusively, because the corporations taking over everything is another reason we don't have a democracy, and the lobby organizations control everything, and that's another reason we don't have a democracy. But that definitely... those two things are big factors. And who owns mainstream media's corpse themselves? Yeah, well, 6 multinational conglomerates own all the mainstream media. That's a great question too. One vote, one person. Yeah, I agree. And you would actually have to have people campaign. So like, I've talked about this before, but like in California has a top 2 system now. Meaning the top 2 vote-getting candidates in that district for that seat out of the primary make it to the general. And some people argued, oh, well, now you have 2 Democrats running against each other. Well, actually, that makes for a better, more thriving democracy, because in a traditional, let's say a district that's way Democrat, right? And you just have a handful of conservatives. The handful of conservatives nobody gave a shit about them. The Republicans would just run some paper tiger, and whatever Democrat won the primary, they nailed they had the general locked up because it was a Democrat in a blue district running against some no-name Republican. And the same thing in an all-Republican district. The handful of Democrats, they didn't give a shit. But now, and this happened a lot in California, you had 2 Democrats, and you had like an old school, incumbent Democrat and then a new young progressive Democrat. And they had great debates and really had to campaign and talk about real issues. And they had to go, because they needed every vote now. They had to go into the Republican parts of this all-blue district and go, hey, I know you're a Republican and I'm a Democrat, but I'm a progressive and I actually want to address these issues that are important to you. And it became a real campaign and a real debate and a real democracy. That's why. Kevin Martinez, also election fraud and voter disenfranchisement. Yeah. I mean, that's another reason. But voter fraud and election fraud and voter disenfranchisement is part of the corporate 2-party system. Those are the tactics of those systems. So the corporate 2-party system is the real problem. And they use the Electoral College and voter fraud and gerrymandering and suppression of the vote. Both parties do this. That's why. Alexander, it's about public versus private health. During the 80s, my country had a great public health. Now it's awful. It's about having an environment where your children can develop into adults that care. Well, yeah, about the world. Well, that's the thing. And you're seeing that in other countries, whatever establishment parties, people are starting to get sick of them because they're doing very similar tactics. And the progressive ideology is gaining more traction because everybody is seeing that these giant corporations are ruining everything. Like if you watch the movie Inside Job, it shows you how Iceland, which had this great low rates of unemployment, it had good health care, it had good jobs, it had a good middle class, and then the banking industry came in and the government made all these crooked deals, and then it screwed over all these people who had done nothing other than the things they were supposed to do. So it's why in whatever country you're in, I would say be careful of any corporate establishment politicians in whatever party you have, because they don't have your people's interests at heart. They have their own personal gain and profit. That's all they care about. Jake, biggest problem right now, selfishness has been elevated to a level of a virtue. Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you're greedy and selfish, I did it for myself. I just did it for me and my corporation or my team or my party. That's like, oh, wow, high five. And compassion denigrated to a level of a vice. Why should I have to pay for someone else's? Yeah, exactly. Name a thing. I have a friend of mine who's like a Reagan Republican who was scared of Trump and voted for Hillary, but he's sort of a Reagan Republican. And he's like, why should I have to pay taxes to help anybody? And I was like, and he's like, he's a Christian, and I was like, well, we shouldn't have to have laws to help, to pay for other people's things. I said, no, you're right. You shouldn't have a law. Everybody should want to contribute to help the greater good of society. And he kind of looked at me. I go, yeah. This idea that why did America become so heartless? I don't want to help anybody else out. Just me, 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 me. But that's the whole corporation. I just did a podcast, episode 4 of the Political Vigilante podcast, which is currently only available for Patreon backers. It'll be on iTunes in a little while. I was talking about the Noam Chomsky book, American Power and the New Mandarins. And you see back in the Vietnam War, we were bombing indiscriminately. And even many people arguing to end the war in Vietnam in the late 60s were like, the financial cost. The mainstream debate, there were some people in the mainstream debate saying this is immoral, but not a lot. A lot of people were like, hey, we're bombing children and poor people in villages. Why are we doing this? So this country has lost its way. It's lost its compassion. And I think the way for us to get around to try to change that is we have to try to have compassion for other people. And that, I know that's not easy. Meaning, even the Trump supporter that we really loathe, the Klan, dumb, make America great. I'm not condoning their awful racism or their actions, but we need to have some type of compassion for them if we're going to truly heal this country. Because if we just, and I've been guilty of this. I've traveled around the country and just been like, oh, those fucking stupid trailer park redneck asshole Trump. And I'm not, this country is really, really racist. And again, I'm not saying, hey, the white supremacist that wants to kill anybody that isn't white, yay, let's all hug and love them. But maybe, I don't know, that's what Gandhi talks about. That's what Buddha talked about. That's what Jesus talked about. So maybe we should try to find some compassion for everyone in our daily lives, even people that we don't necessarily agree with. And I know that is not easy. I'm prone to get emotional and to argue and, treat people like a heckler, fuck you. But I think we should try to address that because this country has no compassion. It just has greed and selfishness. And so we have to combat that in our daily lives. Since none of us, I'm assuming, own giant corporations. Red Economics. Yay, you actually made it this time. Thank you for joining us. Oh, now you guys are having a conversation amongst yourselves. Yeah, Jesus was a socialist. Yeah. God's favorite atheist. That's the thing. So I would encourage, if you're talking or discussing or even debating with like a right-wing Christian, quote the Bible. Talk about what Jesus wanted. Jesus wanted to, when they're like, no, I'm not paying for anybody. Ask them, would Jesus say that about the poor? Would Jesus want to bomb poor countries? Would Jesus not want to help people? Shouldn't we all be wanting to help everyone out? I did a story early on about a Baptist church in Texas, I believe, that was like taking in refugees and wanting them to be included in this very small community in Texas that is super right-wing. So But we also have, if those of us on the left, we have to do this ourselves, because that is a very legitimate criticism of the left, is the talk of, oh, help and love and inclusion and be there for everybody. But then it's like, fuck you. I see this every day in Los Angeles. I saw 2 women in luxury cars arguing over a parking space outside of a yoga studio right before my yoga class. These 2 rich ladies. Then they push and shove their way to get to their spot in the yoga class. And they all have these rainbow stickers and all this other stuff, coexist stickers on their cars, and it's like we need to do that every day in whatever way we can. When you see the crazy homeless person, and there's many here in Los Angeles, and they're like, and it's like I get my distance, because they could hurt somebody, me, whatever. But I got to have some compassion for them, because nobody would want that, to be living on the street dealing with that type of mental illness. And how can we have compassion for this? And how can we do this in our daily lives? I don't know. Maybe it's give the homeless guy a bottle of water. I don't know. But we need to find the compassion ourselves. That's my point, I guess. Alexander, the governments hold a monopoly on our identities. Yeah. But we don't have to. We don't have to say, yes, that's our identity. We can have our own identity. And now with social media, as we're doing right now, we're all talking. There's 22 of you watching this all over the place. And we're all having a conversation. So maybe that's a way to change. At least that's why I'm doing this show. Don't forget you can do the super chat, because there's a bunch of questions. I can't get to all of them, but it's a great way to support the show. I don't know what you guys are having a discussion amongst yourself. Christopher McMillan, while I agree that Trump is not the problem, I disagree that he's a symptom. Yeah, I don't know. I think he's a symptom. Everything Trump is doing is just a grosser, vulgar form of things that have already happened. I do not agree with Stephen Colbert. I think that's neoliberal stuff, to me personally, because Obama deported 2 million people. Obama took us from 2 wars to 7. Obama killed thousands of civilians with his airstrikes. The war in Yemen is illegal. Obama created 5.2 million foreclosures. Obama helped decimate the black middle class. So what Trump is doing is awful, but Obama did it for 8 years. Bush did it for 8 years before him. Clinton did it for 8 years before him. The first Bush did it for 4 years, and Reagan did it for 8 years before him. This has been happening over and over and over. Lyndon Johnson got elected on "I'm going to get us out of Vietnam" and escalated the bombing. Back in '68. He ran, he won easily in '64, and then he didn't seek the nomination in '68, but that's what Lyndon Johnson did. So, agree to disagree, friend. Trump is the symptom. He's not the disease. The disease is the corporate kleptocracy that has taken over this country. Kevin Martinez, sympathy isn't necessary, but empathy sure is. Yeah, you can empathize with somebody. You know, I'm sorry you're going through that. I don't know what it's like to be homeless. I don't know what it's like to be whatever. I don't know what it's like to be anybody that isn't who I am. So I can empathize if you're going through a tough thing versus the martyr competitions we love to get into in America. Oh, I suffered more than you, so your cause is bullshit. I'm the jackwagons. Eve Lee, thank you, Graham. Thank you, Eve. God's favorite atheist. I've had Christian tell me Jesus wasn't that kind of a socialist. He was a spiritual socialist. Yeah, I don't know what that means. That's ridiculous. Just quote this: what you do to the least of my brethren, you do to me. And it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. Just quote those. Look who Jesus hung out with. He hung out with prostitutes and lepers and the poor. That's who he hung out with. That's who he was trying to help. Yeah. Symptom and problem, not mutually exclusive. Yeah, that's true. Hi, Kay. Keep rocking from the UK. What's up? Thank you for coming from the UK. Hi, Kay. That's your name? Well, awesome. I would love to somehow do a show in the UK. When I build up this following, I want to do a show in the UK because I see so many similarities with the Brexit of how a handful of like right-wingers hijacked things, and then the treatment of Jeremy Corbyn, his winning, his well, not flat out, but his party winning so much, I think it's fantastic. So thank you for your support, Hi K, and I will keep rocking it, and you keep rocking it in the UK. Collins Dario, I'm American but lived in England all my life. How do people say free health care like the NHS and free education isn't realistic? We nonchalantly have it like you guys need to get up. Yeah, of course. There's no reason. And here's the other thing. When people use the word socialism as a bad word, when people say, oh, socialism, it's pie in the sky, or we can't afford it, say, I don't want the government involved. Say the government is involved in every single aspect of it. There's not one thing that the government isn't involved in. This talking right now, the FCC regulates this, whatever you agree with them, right? Use the bathroom. The government, oversaw plumbing regulations, anything. So when people are like, oh, socialism, we can never do it, say, well, the parks are socialist, libraries are socialist, public schools are socialist, street cleaning is socialist, trash collection is socialist, snow plows in the north in the winter, that's socialist, fire department is socialist, the police department is socialist, public transportation is socialist. Anyone can use it, and you pay a fare, and I guarantee you most public transportation companies are subsidized from either a local, a state, or a federal level. The whole world has embraced the same platform. Yeah, for sure, Evely. Sage and Fool. My comment wasn't meant to criticize. That's good. Keep it polite, guys. We can disagree, but don't be rude. Best thing about Trump, he is so obviously an asshole. Oh God, yeah. You saw him at the G20 summit. No one would talk to him. He's the asshole, and he thought he was going to roll up, America, make blah, blah. He's just a clown. He's a joke, and then he has his daughter take over on some of his stuff. Oh boy, what is she selling? Her discount shoes? Thank you, Hi K. We will keep rocking from the UK. I like the rhymes. Alexander, let's just end the wars on everything. Yeah, absolutely. The war on drugs, let's talk about the war on drugs for a second since you brought that up. The war on drugs is ridiculous. Drug addiction is not a criminal issue, it's a health issue. Any addict will tell you that. Now, of course, if someone that's high or a drug addict commits some awful violent crime, sure, that crime needs to be prosecuted and treated as the violent crime that it is, but just using drugs? Can you imagine if we treated diabetics this way? Oh, you insulin junkie, and lock them up. Made them sell insulin on the streets. Why don't we deal with the fact that 10 to 20% of the American population needs hard drugs, is addicted to drugs? Why don't we legalize marijuana, which is it's like alcohol is 10 times worse than alcohol and than weed, in my opinion, from working in nightclubs my entire adult life. I've seen what alcohol does. The reason I don't drink anymore is I could be a dick when I drank too much. Weed doesn't make people a dick. Let's deal with again, it goes back to what we just talked about earlier. We have no compassion. Oh, you're a drug addict? You're weak. Get some self-control. It's like ridiculous. It's ridiculous. If we treated drug addicts with compassion, let's get them some help. If the American Medical Association refers to alcoholism and addiction in general as a disease, the American Medical Association refers to drug addiction as a disease. Why don't we treat it that way? We didn't outlaw candy bars because of diabetes. And anyone trying to sell Coca-Cola or whatever, cookies, is getting locked up. And then there's this black market underground. Let's address the addiction in this country. Why are people's lives so shitty that they feel like they got to go through it high or drunk? Maybe if people had hope, if 60% of the population, wasn't in a position where right now 60% of the population cannot afford a $500 emergency. That's pretty stressful. I can see why wanting to get high. I can see that. Yeah, all the wars are ridiculous. Mark, the candy black market would be interesting. Oh, God. That would be weird. Maddie Kerr, meanwhile, alcohol and cigarettes are okay because the government says so. Yeah. I think, but back to the Mark, the addiction thing, one of the positive things I'm seeing on the horizon is what has happened in the state of Colorado since they legalized recreational marijuana, and what is going to happen, I believe, in the state of California when recreational marijuana got passed last election. It becomes law January 1, 2018. And when that happens, I believe that's when they're going to start to see that there is a nice tax revenue from taxable legalized marijuana that's regulated. And I think when you're going to see the effects and a more mellower, and crime rates gone down, and they got money to help the homeless, they have more money, they have better schools, they're building, all this stuff is happening in Colorado as a result of this. And I think when you start to see that, and when you have people like Tulsi Gabbard who came out and said, we need to decriminalize marijuana on the federal level. We need a real progressive, and this is going back to the top of this discussion with the third party, and a legitimate third party, the American Progressive Party, comes in, starts, and whatever, and there's people saying, here's what we're going to do, and here's how it'll help, and show them the statistics and the facts. Because I think a lot of Americans, majority of Americans don't travel internationally. They have no idea what's going on in the rest of the world, other than what's in their little world, their little bubble, and what's in their little social media bubble. Because social media just reflects back what you click on, all of their algorithms. The Facebook ads are just things you say you like, so that's what's going to come back to you. And then if all your friends are the same politically, and they're the same backgrounds, from the same town, and go to the same school, and all went to the same church, and shop at the same Walmart, how the fuck could you possibly know what the goddamn rest of the world is doing? Let alone see, oh, there's another system. And that's how we keep coming back to the facts, the thing that I said at the top of this discussion. Whenever you're in contact with someone who's like, oh, that'll never work, show them, here's an example, here's an example, here's an example, here's an example, here's an example. We can do it here. We can have it here. We all need to get behind it. It can happen. Now that's why I'm running for president. Zox Ovox, the drug war gives an excuse to keeping a standing army in the country that can be turned against the citizens. Oh yeah, of course. Oh yeah, and the war on drugs is a great excuse, and that's why we have this completely militarized police force that just strong arms people and guns people down, and no one's acquitted. That's exactly why. That's a great point. Sage and Fool cigarettes and booze eventually helps the medical system reap profits. Oh yeah, the Western medical and the medicine for profit, it's like private prisons. They're not about helping people. The medical industry just wants to keep you, they don't want to find a cure or give a natural alternative. They don't want you to just be healthy. They don't want you to take a pill and then here's another pill for the side effects from the first pill. It's insane. It's insane. We live in crazy, crazy times. Same with the private prison industry. They're not about rehabilitating people. They're not about, hey, let's have less criminals, because if a prison, the majority of the people in prison are poor. They're poor. So if the prison system had like education, gave people skills, so okay, they made a mistake, they committed a crime, and now they're in prison, and they could actually come out rehabilitated and better citizens. Now they go to prison. It's just a criminal college. They sit there with other criminals. They become more violent. There's no education. Nothing gets better, and they just come out worse criminals. It's worse for society, but the private prison industry gets a lot of money. That's why I watch Orange Is the New Black. It's funny, but it's really a scathing commentary on the private prison industry and wealth inequities in this country. Jeremy Chase, legalize it or not, I'm still smoking. It's 420 somewhere, bro. So where are we at here? Cannon fodder, you have my vote. Outstanding. Don't forget, guys, hit the super chat. So if you want your question, it can stand out. I can read it. God's favorite atheist. Ending the war on drugs would cut off cartels, allowing illegal immigrants to go home. Yeah, I know. That's the other thing. The whole, we got to build a wall. They're all drug dealers and rapists. Oh, really? You mean the cartels that are committing awful atrocities in Mexico and people are trying to flee there? And who's buying all of the the Mexican drug cartel's product? Oh, it's Americans. It's rich Americans that are making the world worse yet again. And now Trumpy wants to build a wall. The majority of the people coming from there are escaping. They want a better life. They're coming here to make money to help support their families because down there in Mexico, it's awful. People are being beheaded. They're hanging bodies in the middle of a town square. Watch the documentary Cartel Land. That's pretty horrifying and sobering reality about what's actually going on and why a wall is ridiculous. Sean Kometz, mental health care needs to be cheaper than the drugs themselves. Oh, yeah, I know. What if we gave people, what if, again, free health care and you had access to a therapist? You had access to, like, a chiropractor, a acupuncturist, a nutritionist, or we're not even teaching nutrition. We have, Coke machines in schools. We're not teaching people financial responsibility. We're not addressing mental health. We're just giving a bunch of drug, narking you up, and throwing you on the streets if you're lucky. That's ridiculous. Jake Smith, Big Pharma and police are against legalized cannabis. Who are they protecting and serving? Exactly. Well, I know a friend of mine is a cop. And I don't know that he'll say these publicly, but he's like, Graham, they should absolutely legalize marijuana. He goes, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And the fact that a plant is illegal. But again, the criminalization of cannabis helps the private prison industry. And because an African-American male is a teenager is 3 times more likely to go to jail for being busted for weed than a white kid. So that helps feed the private prison industry. And they're literally slave labor. Once again, giant corporations finding a way to fuck us over where there's a real clear, easy solution that would actually make the world a better place. Just a little reminder, this is from Alexander, just a little reminder that republic is derived from res publica, Latin, meaning government by the people. Interesting, isn't it? You fucking Kremlin puppet! Get that off my feed! Government for the people, by the people, filthy. No, you're right, dude. Yeah, it's we haven't had a representative democracy in a long time, if it ever. But that's a great point. Jeremy Chase, I'm a former correctional officer, and I was outraged at how difficult it was for them to get an education, right? And just and you saw it firsthand, Jeremy, as a correction officer, and then just when they're released, aren't you more scared? They come out of prison more violent, more educated on how to commit a crime? Wouldn't it be better if they came out better, like I'm reformed, oh man, I was young and stupid and committed a crime, and now I got an education and I have a skill and I'm going to be a productive member of society because I don't want to go back in jail. Isn't that better for all of us? Thanks for sharing that, Jeremy. Sage and Fool, if people were able to explore their own consciousness through legal use of psychedelics in safe spaces, we could gain connection with each other, empathy for all people, and a sense of human community. Oh, that sounds like some hippie bullshit. Why don't you go have your fucking drum circles somewhere else, you goddamn rainbow unicorn riding. No, that's an excellent point, Sage and Fool. That's a great point. Like, I never want to try psychedelics personally. This is just a thing because I got enough crazy business in my brain to deal with. But yeah, if people are allowed to do that, what if everybody got more mellow and more cool and more compassionate? Instead of locking everybody up and fighting and punishment, what if we're like, what if I read this thing, there was a community in Africa, and when a child did something wrong, the whole community got around the child and talked about the positive aspects of that child and why they love that child. Versus the like punishment style I grew up in. Wait till your father gets home and you got smacked and hit and it was like brutal. So now you're being told when someone does something wrong, violence is okay. That's what happens when you hit your kid. You're saying that. And now the argument is, oh, so we could just let our kids be all these safe space cream puffs. But if you, the most effective parenting my mom did is when she would sit me down and go, that was so disappointing. When she yelled and screamed at me, I was just like, whatever, you know. But when she sat me down and went, that's one of the most effective things I had a teacher do. My junior year of high school was an honors English teacher, Mr. Lieberman. And there's a couple of buddies of mine. I played high school football from the football team, and we like kind of blew off an assignment. And he didn't like, wow, that's an F, and scream at us and whatever. He just went, and it was like the first day of class. Like we were supposed to do something before class started. It was an assignment given to us like literally over the summer. And he just said, wow, this is your introduction into this class, and this is how you want to introduce yourselves, is blowing off an assignment. This is an honors class. You elected to be in an honors class. Is that really the foot you want to put forward? This is you guys are young men. You represent this high school on the team. Really, we were just like, I'm sorry, sir. And I gave that teacher, I learned so much. He was such a fantastic teacher. Versus had he just gone, detention, I would have been like, pfft. Let's start there. We can all start there in our own communities with our own kids. God's favorite atheist. We can't let prisoners get an education. Who would sew Made in America tags on our stuff if we don't keep a revolving door of our prisons? Outstanding. Good point. Make America great. Eddie Nunn. Ending the war on drugs would also allow for a relocation of funds that could be used for a plethora of more worthwhile causes, reconstruction, health programs, social programs, etc. Man, that is another exact great point. We ended all these wars. Think of all the money we spend on, first if we ended all the $600 billion a year we spend on the war machine. What if we cut that way back? And then we ended the war on drugs and instead rebuilt the communities that have the biggest drug problems. Education, giving people an opportunity, good education. There was this billionaire in Florida who, and I'll do more research on this because I just sort of skimmed across it, but he started to offered college tuition to this neighborhood that had a high crime rate, and the crime rate went down. Oh, shocker. The money, the things we could do, the trillions of dollars we spent on the war on terror. Think of the society we could live in. America could be leading the way. We could be like this benevolent, philanthropic society that helped people and had compassion and took care. And when someone was acting crazy or something or violent or got in trouble, we'd sit them down and go, what are you doing? Get them some help. You know? Versus just punch them and lock them up and create more violent people and more extreme reactions to things. This is a fantastic discussion today, by the way. Rhombus isotope. No, not the disappointed silence. I don't know what that's in reference to. Don't forget, guys, hit the super chat button. Support the show. George Ho. Eastern medicine is gaining traction in America, apparently, and Western doctors can take classes online to receive a certificate, which can be a problem. Yeah, I've done a lot of Eastern medicine, and I've seen some results from it. I've seen some results from just eating super healthy. And you know, if you watch the documentary Forks Over Knives, they talk about if at least 51% of every meal you have is raw, meaning like fresh fruit, not cooked, not fried, nothing like that, and drinking a lot of water, you actually let your body do its job and fix itself. The human body is an amazing machine. Ofuentes 11, I no longer get notifications of this like I used to, so I'm late again. Yeah, I don't know why, dude. I'm sorry. I do it as I always do. I hit the live stream button. I go public. I don't know why you're not getting things. George Ho, Eastern medicine is a foreign concept to many Americans, but many don't understand that a piece of paper is not equivalent to years of practice and experience. Yeah. I went to an acupuncturist for a long time, and she trained in China for years and was so knowledgeable. And was very helpful with a lot of things. I suggest exploring it and looking into at least what the person's research is. They just got some online certificate to be alternative medicine. I'd be leery of that. But thank you for bringing that up, George. Where are we at here? Jake Smith, if we got the money out of politics, would there be a need for a progressive movement? That's a great question, Jake. Well, if we got the money out of politics, that would be fantastic. For starters, I think we still would need a progressive movement because part of the problem, and this is one of the things Hedges talked about in Death of the Liberal Class, is one of the things that kept liberal institutions powerful was an understanding of human nature, and that some people are going to get greedy, they're going to make mistakes, they're going to go for their own self-interests. So I think you would still need a progressive movement to go, hey, what's in the greatest good? What's in the greatest good? You know, one of the things that I think got us here is the apathy of, oh, they'll take care of it. You know, I voted for Obama because in 2008, because I was like, oh man, I thought for real, he's going to be like a new FDR. He's going to be awesome. And then I didn't pay attention. A lot of people didn't pay attention. And at various times, people stopped paying attention. Clinton got elected in 92 or whatever. And they didn't pay attention. So I think, yes, even if we got the money out of politics, which I would love to see, we would still need progressives not yielding on the things that we want. Ending war, universal health care, universal education, compassion. I think we would still need a progressive movement. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Man, yeah, it's the man keeping us down. Eddie Nunn, we're all the man. Almost every time I'm typing something, you say it, Graham. Well, thank you. God's favorite atheist. I got about another 10, 15 minutes, maybe, guys, maybe 20. So if you support the show, I want to thank HK, Keep Rocking from the UK, for supporting the show, and anyone else who wants to do that, hit the Super Chat button. And also, don't forget, you can support the show by going to the Patreon page. I'm putting the link here. Many of you are already supporters, and I very much appreciate that. If you're at the $5 and up level, I just dropped the new Political Vigilante podcast, which is exclusive to Patreon backers right now. Alexander, what is the greater good? What is the greater good, Alexander? Surfing and getting fucking baked, bro. Where you at, dude? No. For me, what is the greater good? That's a fine question, and it might be different for each individual. What I think the greater good is what's, well, you know, I'm a Trekkie. Literally, this is my my so-called tripod. It's on that. This is what so my eye level is on this Star Trek game. So your question, what is the greater good? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. What is best for all of society? Now, is there a definitive would we all agree on everything? No, not necessarily down to the specifics. Of course not. But I think we could come to some conclusion, and this is a great question to ask and a great discussion to have, is we could come to the conclusion that let's go back to Jesus in the Bible. But what happens to the least of my brethren happens to me. So the person suffering the most in our society should be our greatest priority. So we as a society can feel good and proud about ourselves if we don't have homelessness, if people with drug addiction are being treated from a healthcare point of view, not as criminals. If somebody with mental illness is compassion and given the right diagnoses, that's the greater good. Not killing people for profit, not killing anyone. Let's stick to the original commandments. Thou shalt not kill. That's what I think is part of the greater good. We could discuss the specifics of the greater good on and on, but I think having an educated society, having a well cared for society, safe, good health care, a thriving democracy where we can have discussions and debate and vote and feel good about it. I think that is the greater good. HK, thank you once again for supporting. Trump supporters tend to say him being a billionaire is good enough. Does it annoy you that his wealth somehow elevates his moral worth as if that validates him? Well, that is part of the problem with America and the West in general is being rich means you're already applauded. It's not like, what are you doing with that money? Are you helping people with that money? How did you make that money? It's like, oh, he's rich. That's a problem in society. You know, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a social worker. I'm a public school teacher. Oh, good for no, that's okay. What do you do? Oh man, I got a porn website and I make billions of dollars. Like I've heard that so many times when people. I remember anytime I've been critical. I remember I was in college and I was criticizing Vanilla Ice. I'm like, this guy's awful. And I remember numerous people like, yeah, but he's got bank though. So that right there is a problem, which is why, again, I believe Trump is the symptom, is that coming out of, you watch the movie Wall Street, you read about Gordon Gekko, and that's the era that Trump, came up in, is that greed is good. So do we celebrate the person that works in, that's in Doctors Without Borders and is helping people and a pro bono lawyer? Or do we celebrate the big defense attorney that gets off the celebrity fucking murderer, rapist, or whatever? Steph Curry just signed a $200 million contract. Now, I don't deny that guy's an amazing athlete. I'm sure he works really, really hard to be that good of a basketball player, but that's what we value in our society. The athlete, the celebrity gets more money than the person doing the right thing, and that's a problem. And so it doesn't surprise me that when Trump would fly into his rallies on his helicopter, working class people and poor people who've been screwed over by billionaires like him were like, yeah, he's the man. It's like some big athlete, that grew up in a poor neighborhood, rolls in there in their fancy car, and everyone's like, oh, this is amazing. No one's going, hey, why didn't you, instead of buying a $200,000 car, why didn't you buy a Corolla for $30,000 and then take the other $170,000 and give this woman a house who's getting kicked out? That's part of the problem in America. Everyone's just, what's in it for me? And we respect the bling bling, and everyone just wants to be famous. Look at the reality TV thing. And then if you are, let's say, a scientist and you want to work in science, here's the system too. You get out of college, okay, here's 60 or 70 grand a year working in a think tank or doing research and trying to find cures to diseases. Or here's 200 grand a year working for a pharmaceutical company. You're probably going to take the 200 grand. And not that the person that takes the 200 grand is a bad person, but look at the system. It's hard to turn that kind of financial security down when without money you can't eat or have a roof over your head. So that's the problem, is that being wealthy, we talked about this earlier in the discussion, being selfish is like lauded as like a, wow, you're awesome. So Trump's a billionaire. His dad gave him $1 million. He's a Silver Spoon trust funding asshole. Oh, look at that. Look what he did. He keeps failing upwards. He's a smart businessman. He's bankrupted, 7 companies? He's had to file bankruptcy, but that's rewarded. That's rewarded. That's why we talk about Tom Brady gets busted for cheating in football. Who cares? And he lies because he can't admit fault. And if he gets a good attorney and he wins, boom, he wins. He's looked at as a hero for that. So, it's why Trump is just a symptom. Look at any rich person who has deplorable behavior or is an asshole or greedy or whatever. There's some people around him going, yeah, but at least he's got money. Someone will say that. Sometimes it's liberal, neoliberals saying that. Yeah, but look at that fat house. Look at that big mansion. Like when I hear celebrity athletes or like celebrities talk about injustices, I'm always like, okay, but where, what are you doing? You know, Jessica Chastain gave that speech at Cannes, and she made a very relevant speech. She said, she was on the jury at Cannes in May, the film festival, right? And she's there in a very nice outfit. And she's like, you know, I watched a bunch of movies to be on the jury, and I was appalled at how women are depicted in film. That's a very valid point. I've talked about this on my podcast, Comedy Film Nerds. You know, so many times women, the female characters, they're not fleshed out, they're two-dimensional, or they're abused. I mean, it's really bad. And she made a great point. She said, I've never met any man that's amazing as the men depicted in movies, and I've never seen a woman depicted in a movie as amazing as the women I know in real life. And it's a great point. But of course, there's Jessica Chastain and probably $10,000, $20,000 in jewelry and fancy dresses. And she didn't choose to work for Habitat for Humanity her whole life. She didn't choose to make, you know, 30 grand a year as a public school teacher or become a physician and work with Doctors Without Borders and go into war zones and get shot at. She chose to be an actress and became a millionaire A-list celebrity. So good for her for making that point and using her forum at Cannes to demonstrate the problems with movies and how women are depicted and how people of color are depicted or just not even cast in movies. That's a very valid thing to talk about. The Oscar so white thing is the Academy is an all-white country club. I've said this numerous times on my film podcast, but again, she's saying it in this egregious wealth. The south of France is just unbelievable how much wealth is there. And that festival is all these rich people and these billionaires on yachts who want to finance movies and put themselves and put their nephews and their girlfriends. It's just, and she's a part of that machine. So she didn't say, and this is why my next film, I'm taking my $3 million paycheck and I'm giving it to, I'm going to build a girls' school or whatever. She didn't do that. She went back to her 5-star hotel, and good for her for making the remark. Good for her for saying it, but she went back to her 5-star hotel, and then she flew first class back to her fancy house somewhere in L.A. That's the problem. But HK, thank you for bringing that up, man. And thank you for coming and supporting the show. Okay. All right, Jake Smith. Medical care is getting attention from people because they need it. The people with homes don't care about the people that are homeless. Yeah, that's, again, part of the thing we've been talking about this entire super chat. And my question to all of you, how can all of us, just in a small way, I understand, look, if I was a billionaire, I would live in a modest condominium and give the rest of my money away. But there's not a lot of people, not a lot of billionaires that think the way I do. So how can all of us do little things to help? That's the thing we should all walk away from today and ask ourselves, what little ways can we help? I've done some volunteer work in my life. You know, I'm doing like a part of a Big Brother mentor program for a kid that was born into a tough situation and his dad's not around and his mom works 3 jobs and she's from another country, and that's how I can help. And you can do little things like that to show compassion and to show help and to try to help people out. That's, I think, what we can do. That's just my suggestion. Leary 50, dollars don't grow on rich people. The federal government is the monopoly issuer of the currency. The problem is the rich guy are elected officials. Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. But, yeah, the government is owned by the giant rich corporations, and they have taken over every aspect of society, the courts, everything, the media, the politicians. So then there's nobody holding them in check. There's nobody going, hey, wait a minute. There's nothing wrong with earning a lot of money, but you got to give back. There's a social contract. You got to give back to people. You got to help out. You know, they're not being held accountable. And as we just discussed earlier from HK, then, you know, oh, I got this $10 million house here, and I got a place in the south of France, and everyone's like, yay. No one goes, why don't you just have one little modest house and then give the rest to charity? God's favorite atheist, do you think we should start a new currency? Man, that's a great question. And I've had some people bring up to me about Bitcoin. I believe Alexander Ostojic has mentioned that to me in your email. That's a great question. I don't know. I would love to talk to like a Nobel laureate economist and say, what are our options since this looks bad? I would love to talk to somebody who's that knowledgeable about it and hear what they have to say. If you know any Nobel laureate economists, have them email me. I'd love to interview them. Nobody's talking about the 2 million homeless children. Yeah, America is... Who's that one follower? Was it Paul Ryan or some jackass like that? Our homeless are the envy of the world. Oh, man, look at the homeless walking around your towns. Aren't you envious of them? Jackasses. Bernie Sanders is talking about the homeless. Yes, he is. George Ho, then join an organization that focus on these issues and you can talk about it all the time. Okay, you guys are discussing stuff with yourself. All right, guys, a couple more questions, then I'm going to wrap it up because I got to get going. Cannon fodder, every time my wife and I see a homeless person, we always give them whatever we can, money and food. Yeah. You know, I personally try to give them money because I don't want to support their alcohol or drug addiction, but then I've had some friends of mine go, yeah, but let the guy get drunk. He's probably in a lot of pain. I don't know. That's me personally where I draw the line. I try to give him a bottle of water, some food or whatever. That's what I try to do. If I eat at a restaurant and I have leftovers and there's a homeless dude on the way to the car or home or whatever, I try to give it to that person. I don't do that every time, but I try to. And I also voted for Measure H. LA County this past March had a Measure H, where they're putting a little bit of a tax and it's going to spend something like $30 million a year to help get the homeless off the streets and build shelters and get them education and jobs and training and health care, mental health care and all this stuff. So I voted for that. That's a thing you could also petition in your wherever you guys live to get something like that. And if you work for a big company, you work for a restaurant, I don't know, every restaurant and grocery store throws away food every day. Maybe there's a way to give some of that food just to some homeless people or something, or just have it delivered to a shelter or something. They would take it. I've worked for a lot of non-for-profits. They'll take whatever help they can get. All right. Lenny 50, if so, I suggest following wheel progressives. That's a good idea. Lynn 50, will you try to learn modern monetary theory? Sure. Yeah, I would. Maybe you're talking to Alexander. Ken Jerome, I pass on panhandlers but give to the food bank and donate time when I can. Yeah, that's another great way to do it. I know some people are like, I don't like giving to panhandlers because then they put garbage and they go to the bathroom in the street. Okay, I see that. I see that. Food banks are great. I always have disaster supplies because I live in an earthquake zone and I try to rotate them out. I'm not as good as I should every 6 months to a year, and I take those canned foods as long as they're not expired and I give them to the food bank. Donating to food banks is fantastic. They started this, I want to do a story on this, I believe in Denver. They started mobile laundry services for the homeless as a way to give them, like, because you walk around and your clothes smell bad. You can't get it. You can't go in for a job interview. You can't. It's hard to do anything. People just ugh. So it's like a way to give them dignity. And someone's able to get their laundry done and wear clean clothes. Maybe they can get cleaned up and go try to get a job and get housing and get off the streets. Yeah, donate to those causes, man. Pick some causes and donate to them. And even if you don't even have a lot of money, every little bit helps. Every little bit helps. Yeah, act locally. Absolutely. God's favorite atheist. Do you think everyone should get subsidized income? Wow, universal basic income. I did a story on that. It's real interesting. I'm real curious about that, and I'm very open to it. And I think it could be a pretty fantastic thing if done correctly, because then you would have less crime. People would be stressed out. I mean, I think I think you could have an amazing society that way. George Ho, Hawaii is actually talks at university. George Ho, Hawaii. Oh, I love Hawaii. What island do you want, brother? I was just in Oahu and the Big Island in March. I love it. I go there once a year. It's fantastic. Ron Basaisojob. Yeah, my state is getting the world's largest L-ion battery. Won't stop us having the world's highest power prices. On the other hand, we have power. That's a good point. Christopher McMillan, we should have basic income and a job guarantee. Yeah, it would make for a better society. Sounds like crazy socialism, though. George Ho, you should check out the organization Save the Children, one of my top charities. Thank you for bringing that to all of our attention, you guys. Jake, universal basic income may be necessary in the face of increasing automation job market. Yeah, it's got a lot of interesting stuff happening. I know there are good people, but the mass only fights for the guy in the mirror. Yeah, that's true. But you don't have to do that. Just because the masses are doing something, the masses are being selfish, the masses are being greedy, you can be better. Just do it on your, just worry about yourself. I heard a great expression. Everything that's, I imagine myself standing in a hula hoop. Everything that's inside of that hula hoop is my business. Everything that isn't, and that's outside of it, isn't. Meaning, yes, you can be frustrated and talk about all these things, but I have no control over somebody being greedy. I can just lead by example. And if I lead by example, maybe others will start doing that, which is what this community that we're building here is all about. Do I integrate any of the, Matt Kerr, do I integrate any of these kind of ideas into my stand-up? It's one of the reasons I started this YouTube channel was because stand-up comedy in a comedy club is so like, you got to be joke, 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 joke. And you're going in, and I'm not hugely famous, so a large portion of the audience doesn't know who I am, so I have to prove myself to them, and trying to make this completely funny is tough to figure out. Why I did this YouTube channel is so I could talk about politics and build an audience, and hopefully I want to get to the point where I'm like Jimmy Dore and have a huge following, and then he can go and he gets people coming to his comedy clubs, and he can talk politics and be funny and do everything. That's the overall goal, is that... So I'll leave with George Ho's quote. What is popular is not always right, but what is right is not always popular. A quote I saw as a kid in a classroom. That is a fantastic quote. Well, you folks have been fantastic. I have to go. Thank you so much for, this has been a fantastic discussion. And, you know, hi, Kay, thank you so much for the support. Big shout out to you and everybody out in the UK. I hope to make it back there. I love the UK. And thank you to all of you for tuning into this show and all your support here and on Patreon. And obviously, if you're like, hey, money's tight, subscribing, sharing the videos, those are great ways to support the show for free. You know, YouTube tracks all the numbers, putting it on your social media. And then you can support the Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You guys are all fantastic. Mahalo, George Ho, and everybody else. Sean, God's Favorite Atheist, Alexander, Jake, Maddie, all you folks. Christopher, Lynn 50, all you fine Jake Smith and the regular Jake. You guys are all fantastic. I love doing this. And the bonus Patreon video will go up later today. The podcast episode 4 is already up on the Patreon. And thanks for watching the show. I'll be dropping videos every day as always. And hopefully see you next week. Aloha.